Hi, everybody. Please say hello when you come in. Welcome to Hanover Square, New York City. It's a pleasure to have you. As always, it's wonderful to have you here tonight on this cold December night in 1775. So I'll wait a few minutes for more people to join us. Now, sometimes it takes a few minutes for people to come in and say hello and settle down and get comfortable here in the parlor. Mr. White is here. Hello, Mr. White. It's always good to have you. Ms. Kane is here. Hello, Ms. Kane. We have a fun night tonight, I think maybe talking about some issues leading into the American Revolution that you might not be too aware of. So I think we'll have a really good time, have some um, informative and interesting conversation as we always do here at Hanover Square. And John the Bagel Dad is there. He says it is 65 degrees there. It is snowy here. It has snowed a few weeks ago, and that snow is still on the ground with various layers of snow on top of it. So it is a typical December evening here in the Northeast. Hello, Ms. Joan, Stephanie Joan. It's nice to have you here as well. So tonight is, what is it, December 11th? And since this is America 250, it's 250 years ago, which means it is 1775. And there's quite a lot of interesting things going on in America in December of 1775. I think, as we've mentioned before, a lot of people think that America 250 is all about the year 1776, but you all know that in December of 1775, the war has already commenced, hasn't it? How many months ago now? 8 months ago, at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. And Mr. Robbins is here. Hello, Mr. Robbins. It's good to have you. Happy to see you here tonight. So the war has already begun 8 months ago by December of 1775. And here in New York, we are wondering not only what is going on in Philadelphia with our Continental Congress, but also what is going on with our regiments who are in Canada. Because earlier this fall, we have launched an invasion of Canada with the intent of dislodging the British from their base at Montreal and also, if possible, at Quebec. Now, word is that Major General Richard Montgomery from New York and his men have been successful at Montreal. An incredible thing to celebrate that we have removed the British from their fort at Montreal and have been on their way to join up with Colonel Benedict Arnold's expedition from New England, which is in Quebec. And it takes a long time to get information from that far away. It's difficult to travel over areas that are wilderness and are very poorly mapped, as well as the weather, as you can imagine what it must be like up there. So information is scarce. Mr. Q just headed out a few minutes ago, told me he would be out and he would be back soon. I think he went over to the Burns Coffee House to see if anyone there has any additional word of our men who are in Canada, who should have met up with Colonel Arnold's expedition to Quebec by now, I think. And so they are there, and we have very little word, and hopefully they will be as successful at Quebec as they were at Montreal. Maybe while we're doing this, Mr. Q will return with some interesting news that maybe somebody else has received. Although I kind of doubt that, because if there was any news, everyone in the town would have heard it by now. I know that the Reverend Timothy Edwards of Elizabethtown is quite concerned, as his nephew, Aaron Burr, and his wife's young brother, Matthias Ogden, are both with Arnold's expedition, and I don't think Reverend Edwards has heard anything from them. So I know he's quite concerned and worried about where these two young men, who are just about 19 years old, are and how well they're doing. So Mr. Q will head out and see if he can find any information for us, because of course the places to get the information is in the taverns and coffee houses, and all the gentlemen like Mr. Q prefer the Burns Coffee House up on the Broadway. So we'll see if he comes back with any information. Now, also, news has reached us that a young general, Henry Knox from Boston, has been to Ticonderoga, where he has loaded up cannon from Ticonderoga on a number of carts pulled by oxen and horses and is on his way to take it to Boston, which he's hoping to have there by spring. Mr. Tulloch is here. Hello, Mr. Tulloch. I am quite warm, as you can see. I'm wearing my quilted jacket and my scarf, and I'm quite warm here tonight. I hope you are well wherever you are. So we have heard that this young General Henry Knox, who was I think, a bookseller in Boston, and that most of his knowledge about military strategy has come from the books he has read, has gathered up the cannon from Ticonderoga. You might remember was taken earlier this year by Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys of New England, and Colonel Benedict Arnold. And just to let you know, Ethan Allen of the Green Mountain Boys, I think in your time is known as being from Vermont, but the Green Mountain Boys were formed because we claim that area as part of New York, and New England claims it as part of New England. I think Massachusetts claims it. And the Green Mountain Boys were formed to harass New York into giving them their autonomy. And in your time, you know that area where they're from as the state of Vermont, which does not exist yet in 1775. So Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys and Arnold took Ticonderoga earlier this year, and those are the cannon that General Knox is now planning to take to Boston over the Berkshire Mountains in the winter. And I believe he's also going to have to cross a number of frozen waterways. So we'll keep our eye on that and see how that progresses as the year goes on. Miss Silver is here from Los Angeles. Oh, that's so great. Los Angeles, which is unknown in my time, isn't it? We don't know what's out there. You know, the furthest we know are the furthest reaches of New York and Pennsylvania, Virginia. We don't know what's out there. So you're in a place that in my time is unknown. It's so interesting to think about, isn't it? That people of my time would not even know there's a shore that you live on. So it's quite an amazing thing to try to put ourselves back into 1775 and what we know at that time versus what you experience in your modern time. So those are the two big events that are really going on, is the expedition to Quebec and General Knox's movement of the cannon, hopefully to Boston to reinforce General Washington by spring. And we'll see how those two endeavors play out over time. Now, here in New York, there's still much discussion of James Rivington's press being destroyed and he and his family being driven out of New York. As you can imagine, it's still very controversial, and many people are very much against what happened. Oh, Miss Silver tells me that there are missions being built in the 1700s, of course, Spanish missions, of course, that we in New York don't really know about yet. Maybe some of our explorers or some of our young men here in New York who are Spanish fur traders, which Mr. Q is, you might know, is a Spanish fur trader, might know a little bit more of that Western coast than the general population here in New York knows. Oh, and it is my good friend, Mr. DW, who it is wonderful to see him here tonight. Also from a part of the country, DW, I believe, is in a part of the country that Mr. Q might know from his fur trading expeditions, but that I certainly have no knowledge of here on the coast of New York. Excuse me. I have some winter dry, runny nose, runny eyes. I think you are all very familiar with that from the fire, of course, and the dryness from the heat. So we are also very concerned about what happened with James Rivington, and our provincial Congress, whose president now is General Nathaniel Woodhull, has sent a formal complaint to Governor Trumbull of Connecticut about the people from Connecticut who made their way into New York unwelcomed and destroyed Mr. Rivington's printing press and drove him out of the city. And also, of course, there was the kidnapping of the three gentlemen from Westchester, the Reverend Samuel Seabury among them. So we have entered a formal complaint with the governor of Connecticut over that incident. And we have Mr. and Mrs. Hamlin are here. And they're looking for gentleman, Mr. Gaddy, a whole group of us who you might know from Saturdays. on Mike Gaddy's Rebel Madman radio as Lady and the Tramps. A whole group of us are here in my salon tonight, so very nice to welcome all of my future rebel friends. But in 1775, we're all rebels together, aren't we? Or are we? Because all of this is happening in 1775, and it seems our Congress still cannot decide on whether or not we should separate from England. And colonies to the south still see no reason to even discuss such an issue because they still believe that all of the problem is a New England problem, that it's a Yankee problem at that time. They don't yet foresee that they will become a part of this assault on America that the British are waging. And I would just ask our friends in the colonies who don't yet believe this if they really believe that the masses and the troops and the ships that are on their way from England to the Americas really are meant only for Boston. But we'll have more about that as 1776 arrives, and we know a little bit more about the size of the force that is currently being deployed here. So today I was thinking a little bit about how all of this trouble with England really began about 10 years ago in the year 1765 during something called the Stamp Act. But it really began before the Stamp Act, because even before we talk about the Stamp Act, I should tell you that we were already in rather a bad temper concerning our government in England, even when the Stamp Act was announced in March of 1765. So almost 11 years ago now. And why were we in such a bad temper? Well, it's all about trade, isn't it? It's always about trade and about commerce and about income and about taxes. Now, I don't know if you're how aware you are. I have some interesting notes I've taken here on some commentary from the time to share with you. I'm not sure how much you know about colonial trade in my time and what kind of goods were going in which direction and why. So to give you an idea, before the problems with England started, so let's go back to say 1760s. Let's go back about 15 years ago. If you were to walk through here, the port of New York, you would find any number of different types of ships anchored here. From the Hudson Valley and Long Island, you would find a great deal of sloops that have come in carrying everything that they have there: cornmeal, poultry, meat, butter, all coming in to be sold in our markets here in New York. In addition to that, loads and loads, barrels and barrels of wheat, flour, Indian corn, salt beef, pork, beans, peas, oats, butter, cheese, and even venison. Almost everything you could imagine that could be grown and harvested or hunted and preserved coming into New York from all of those big farms along the north shore of Long Island, the southern shore of Connecticut, and down the Hudson Valley, coming into New York where they're unloaded, repackaged, and sent to the Caribbean islands. Because our friends in the Caribbean islands grow only sugarcane and tobacco, which means they have need for all of these other products. They are our only market for these products, as England produces those herself and does not want competition from us. So we have no market in England to sell what we have to sell, but we do have market in the Caribbean islands. And you might know that some of those islands are Dutch, some of those are Spanish, some of those are French, and some of those are British. And up until the 1760s, we sold openly to all of those islands. From those islands, in exchange, we bring molasses and sugarcane and rum, except to New England, where they take the molasses and sugarcane and make their own rum. So those are the products that we bring back. The sugar we then use as currency to buy what we need from England. Because you see, we are not allowed to manufacture here. We are a captive market for England. So there are all sorts of manufacturers we must buy from England. Things like broadcloth, silk, earthenware, cutlery, saddles, bridles, silverware, furniture, pewter, many types of clothing, and other manufactured goods, all must come from England. They come twice a year. They come in April and November with large ships loaded down with these goods. And our way of paying for those is with the sugar, right? Because sugar is worth more than its weight in gold. So as long as this trade triangle is working well, we're all very happy. We send all of our crops, our meat, our poultry, and the things we make to the Caribbean. The Caribbean trades with us for sugarcane, molasses, and some tobacco. It comes back to us, and we use that to trade with England with the goods we need from England. And everybody is happy. Now, you might be wondering why we're not trading in British pounds, because it's very rare here. The British choose to keep money or specie rare here. So we don't have very much access to British pound sterling. We do have access to Spanish dollars, and there is some trade that goes on with the Spanish islands in Spanish dollars. Many people here in New York trade in Spanish dollars, but again, that's not a currency that's in common circulation. So as long as everybody can move their goods to everybody who needs it, we are all very happy. We are prosperous and we're happy. But what happens when we can't do that? What happens when English decides that the items we get from the non-British islands, or Indies as they're called, ought to have tariffs on them, high tariffs? And those were called the Molasses Act and later the Sugar Act, which was placing a tariff on every barrel of molasses or every weight of sugar that we imported from the non-British islands. So this, of course, favors those items from the British islands. The problem with that is that the Spanish, French, and Dutch islands are more fertile and they have more to sell, which means from us, they have more to buy. So if we aren't unable to trade with them, we have no market for our goods. We have little sugar coming in to trade for English goods. It seems ridiculous to think that England would do such a thing, but they did do such a thing. And commerce came to a standstill in America and here in New York as well. We had no markets in the Caribbean for our goods, nowhere to send it to. Couldn't send it to England, which meant less sugar coming to us, which meant less to trade with what we could trade in England. The British Islands simply were not a big enough market to sell our goods or to obtain enough sugar to pay for what we needed from England. And I see some comments here. Mr. Facemeyer is here from Manassas, Virginia. Welcome, Mr. Facemeyer. So as a result of the Molasses and later the Sugar Act, as a later revision of the Molasses Act, where they felt that if they reduced that tax or that tariff, it would be easier on us. They reduced it, but it was not. So what happened in commercial centers like New York is there was no work. There's no work on the docks. Even merchants like my family now began to suffer, having nothing to sell. Nothing to sell, no way to buy the goods to come into our shops. And before you know it, commerce was dead. And many people in the street begging for money, people selling their clothes, selling their furniture, anything they had. So we decided that maybe we should try to make our own things, that we would make our own things, and that everybody would give up commerce instead to become artisans of various types. So there was more weaving of fabric, more sewing of what we call clothes that were homespun clothes, more manufactures of some of the things we got from England, and everybody started learning these new things. And people started investing in these new types of manufactures here, which we could not sell except to each other. And so this changed our economy to one based on that triangle of England and the Caribbean with just among ourselves. And I have some quotes here I think I have for you about what was going on at that time. Now, in 1766, so this is just around the time of the Stamp Act also, which also I'll get into, put other restrictions on us and other financial hardships. There was a play announced in the Chapel Street Theater, and many people were very upset about it as the economy here was terrible and people were suffering greatly. And it was thought that having such a pastime for simply the wealthy in the town was an outrageous thing to do. And many people who bought tickets didn't even show up for the play. A few people did, but a huge crowd entered the theater. A mob entered the theater and destroyed the theater. People ran out as fast as they could. They even climbed through windows. They left behind their coats, their canes, and other personal belongings, and everything was destroyed. There even was a young boy who was badly hurt, being trampled by the crowd. Everything was taken from the theater and brought a few blocks away to the Commons and burned there. To give you an idea of the anger at the wealthy people in New York who were still displaying wealth, while so many other people were still so distressed in their economy. So people formed something called the Society for Promoting Arts, which I mentioned was teaching people to weave, to make clothing, and to make all of the things that had become so difficult to obtain from England. And so even some men were learning to use looms, were learning to sew, because really what else could we do, right? Except make our own goods. So these were called homespun. And I have a quote here from a young lady in the town about wearing homespun. And first, I'll say that someone in the town did mention that you couldn't believe how much it cheered our distress to be able to now make the things we needed and barter with each other for them. And it really helped get us out of that despondent mood that we were in because of the great economic disaster which had befallen us because of, bad decision making on the part of our English government. So one young lady said, she wrote to a friend in the country, and she said that the women of New York City were resolved to resign the charms of dress and let a horrid homespun covering, which made one look nothing more than a country wench, take the place of the rich brocades and graceful satins. In other words, the ladies of New York were giving up their brocades and satins for clothes that made them look like nothing more than a farm lady, a country woman, and how terrible that was that the ladies were doing that. But it was a mark of honor to do that, to wear the homespun rather than the fabrics from England and from Europe. So everyone was quite distressed about this. And then came in March of 1765, the Stamp Act. So you can see when the Stamp Act was passed, there was already quite a lot of distress and anger here at England's foolishness. You have to ask yourself, a mother country who supposedly loves and cares for her offspring, why would they create a tax that would effectively bring all commerce to a stop? It didn't help them because if we had no commerce with those islands, there was no tax to collect. If we could not afford to pay the tax, then we could not afford to trade with those islands, so there was no tax to collect. Instead, there was a lot of smuggling, wasn't there? A lot of smuggling all up and down the East Coast, which I will not even try to say I wasn't a part of. Of course, my father, who was then, running our store and our enterprise here, of course, my father engaged in quite a lot of smuggling during that time, as did all of our neighbors and colleagues. So instead, there was smuggling. And as a result of smuggling came enforcement by the British Navy. And as a result of British enforcement came anger on the part of the people here. So you can see how this is snowballing and growing over these years from the original Molasses Act, which is way back in 1733. What is that? 42 years ago, to then the Sugar Act of 11 years ago, to then the Stamp Act of 10 years ago. And the Stamp Act now placing taxes on all paper items as well as other items, saying that to buy and sell these items, you needed to either affix a stamp showing you paid the additional tax, or buy various types of paper directly from England, placing American paper mills out of business. So if your business was paper, you would be put out of business by this, and raising the price of everything paper. Well, everything is paper, isn't it? Our newspapers are paper, diplomas are paper, ship manifests are paper, business documents are paper, graduation degrees are paper, everything is paper, playing cards are paper, letter writing is paper, everything is paper. And so this tax was even larger than the tax on sugar, which was, of course, repealed, that tax with the Caribbean islands. And the reason it was repealed, this is an interesting reason, is that England, looking over at America, and seeing us in America beginning to make the things that England made, and fearing that if we became efficient at doing that and began selling amongst ourselves as colonies, why would we ever get those things from England again? It would effectively replace English manufacturers, wouldn't it? We would have no need to buy them from England if we bought them from each other. And so the tax was removed so that we could go back to trading with the non-English islands in the Caribbean. So the tax was removed, even though it didn't really get them anything. It was removed more out of fear of competition of American manufacturers, right? And we were still, by law, forbidden from manufacturing and selling anything England sold here or to the other islands. So England again made us a captive market and then decided, all right, now that we've lifted the Sugar Act and they can trade freely with the Caribbean islands again, and this will put them back on a commercial footing, and they will be commercially successful and have money again, we can withdraw some wealth from them with a tax on paper and other goods. So this is their next idea, was that they could take some of our wealth for taxes on paper. And that, we were told, of course, was to keep the army here after the French and Indian War, 7 Years' War. They claimed that they needed to keep an army here now to defend us from the French and the Indians. And did we really need that army here? Many of us didn't think so. Many people, like Mr. Q, believed that that was going to be an occupying army used by the royal governors to put an end to dissent, right? Because there had been so much dissent here over the years, over the press. We've talked about that, over association, over all sorts of things, over Anglican schools. There had been so much dissent here in the colonies that people felt that the real purpose of keeping the army here was to frighten us into being a little more quiet and a little more reserved about criticizing England. So we were not very happy about having the military remaining here after the French and Indian War, much less being forced to pay for it through an external tax. So this is the difference now between the stamp tax and the molasses and sugar taxes. The molasses and sugar taxes we did not object to on any philosophical or government grounds because we agreed that England had the right to place duties, taxes on goods traveling within the British Empire, that was their right to do that, and it was a way for them to raise revenue to finance the government. What we did object was when they did it and we couldn't pay it, and it put us out of business. But we did not object to the taxes philosophically or on any government or legal basis. But we did object to the Stamp Act on that basis, because if we go back to the words of our friend Stephen Hopkins of Connecticut, when he wrote, I'm sorry, Mr. Hopkins, yes, of Connecticut, when he wrote his pamphlet about the rights of the British colonies, he said that one of the deals that were made between Britain and the people who came here to settle this land was because they would be risking so much, their gift in return would be the full rights and protections of British subjects. So the people who came here and their descendants would be recognized as full British subjects and enjoy all rights and privileges of such. So if that was true, and British subjects can only be taxed with consent, the Parliament could not tax us. They could not tax us. So they either could not tax us or were denying our rights as British subjects, as agreed upon when these colonies were settled. And some people in the Parliament, in the House of Commons, actually said that it was not their duty to recognize charters that were agreed to by their forefathers, that this was a different time. and that all of the elements of those charters should not have to be recognized 100 years or more later. A very sticky issue, isn't it? And someone, of course, over there warned that if they did not recognize our charters, we would then tear them up ourselves, deny that England had any authority over us, which might happen next year in 1776, won't it? So that person in the Parliament, Edmund Burke, was quite um, um, brilliant in his foresight of what would happen. But there was conversation in the House of Commons at that time that charters granted so long ago by a completely different monarch should not have to be observed in our time, especially when England was suffering economic problems because of the war they fought here to protect us from the French and the Indians. Was that war fought to protect us from the French and Indians? Or was it fought between the French and the English over land in the colonies? Did it have anything even to do with us? Many of us don't believe so, that this was just a conflict between England and France, and that England was looking for a way to make us pay for it, and on the side, to keep their troops here, to keep an eye on us. Right, because they didn't want us to travel too far west. They didn't want us to travel too far west. They didn't want us negotiating with the Indian tribes without one of their agents present, right? They wanted to, keep an eye on us and keep our expansion limited and keep our voices a little more subdued. So that was what we saw the Stamp Act as really being for, but we objected to it on the grounds that it was illegal, unlike the Sugar and Molasses Acts, which the Parliament had the right to put into place because they were trade. So I hope you're understanding some of these fine points about what have been going on here leading up to the conflict with England, that we didn't object to every type of tax. We objected to the taxes we saw as illegal and violating our rights, our full rights as subjects of the crown. Now you might say, but Mrs. Q, you and Mr. Q, your families were not a part of those people who settled from England. So how do you claim that you have rights as British subjects? Because people who came from elsewhere after 7 years were granted full rights and privileges as British subjects, as long as they met certain religious and cultural requirements, which both Mr. Q's family and my family met. So we also are naturalized British subjects here in America, do all the rights and privilege of a British subject living in England. The same rights, not to be taxed by people we don't elect. Mr. Robert, Ms. Roberts is here, and she says it's glad to see me live. It's glad to have you here live. So these are the events leading up to the current unpleasantness with the crown. So some people believe that it's only the Stamp Act that really started the problems, or some people even believe that it was the Tea Act that started the problems with England. But it really goes back much further, doesn't it? It goes back much further to 1733, with England trying to limit trade with the non-English islands in the Caribbean and favor those British islands, so that those British islands would be more productive. But they simply could not be more productive because the land was not as good as the land on the other islands, and they were not as numerous. So we were very happy to trade with our friends, the Dutch and the French and the Spanish, and build a great commercial city here in New York as a result of that, Philadelphia as well, and Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts to some degree, until England ridiculously decided we should not trade with those islands and destroyed the commerce here and created an atmosphere in which we then began manufacturing things that might compete with England in her markets. And England then decided, oh, we should withdraw that tax and let them continue to trade with the Caribbean islands. But I ask you, did England think that we were stupid here, that we didn't know what England was up to, and that they would, given an opportunity, try to inflict monopoly on us again? Because that really is what that did in the Caribbean, didn't it? It attempted to create a monopoly in trade with us for the British islands there. that the British islands would have a monopoly in trade with us, and the other islands would not. They would have less trade with us because of the tax. Little did England understand they would have no trade with us because we couldn't pay the tax. And they will do this again, won't they? They'll do this again with something called the Tea Act, where they'll attempt again to create a monopoly in the sale of tea here for the East India Tea Company by making the Dutch tea far more expensive. So you see how it's working and what they're continually trying to do with us. Well, they did, repeal the Stamp Act because things here simply got so violent that they were afraid to try to impose it. First of all, none of the stamp agents would take the job of distributing the taxes, distributing the stamps and collecting the taxes because they were just too afraid. Here in New York, we had a terrible riot the night before the Stamp Act went into effect, the greatest violence we'd ever seen here, which included Major James, commander of Fort George, having his beautiful home at Vauxhall completely destroyed, invaded by protesters, his library torn apart, his furniture thrown from the window, curtains set on fire, and his staff chased out of his home as a result of him telling us he would force us to take the stamps. Very violent, something we'd never seen before. And eventually that violence led to almost total anarchy here in the town until we got together and agreed that we would simply refuse to buy the manufactures from England. The thing they were so afraid of, right? By the time of the Stamp Act, we had already experimented with homespun and manufacturers, hadn't we? So it was quite easy for us to go into that mode where we again started manufacturing our own clothes and some of our own furniture and some of our own goods so that we could not trade with England. Although this time, after the enforcement of the Stamp Act, so after it went into effect on November 1st, 10 years ago, we were much better at it, and we became a much bigger threat to England's economy, England's commerce at that time, because it looked like we would be able to go a reasonably long time without buying anything from England or sending them anything. And it was only 2 months of that got England to repeal the Stamp Act. So you can see how we're learning as we go along, learning about commerce as we go along, and how to inflict suffering on England as she has inflicted suffering upon us. So now here in December of 1775, we are back in the mode of no manufacturers from England, right? We've entered again into a non-importation, non-exportation agreement, and that we will accept nothing carried on English ships, and we will not buy any goods, and we will not send anything to England. So we are again in the midst of one of these because of the ongoing, my friends like to call it the ongoing unpleasantness with England, but shouldn't we simply call it what it is, the ongoing war with England? I heard someone say the other day, it was really a wonderful phrase. I can't remember which of my friends it was, who said that the worst tyrant, I think they were discussing the Hessians who are coming with England, right? You call them Germans, call them Hessians, who are coming from England. They are soldiers fighting for German princes and being paid for their fighting. A friend of mine the other day said, even the worst tyrants doesn't hire foreign mercenaries to slit the throats of their children. In other words, England is hiring foreigners to kill her own children. And how disgraceful is that? Oh, my dog Rex has arrived. He says it's 65 on the Southwest Florida patio. He asks everybody to hit the like button. I should remind you that as well. Please hit the like button on my video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel so more people will learn about Mrs. Q Live and more people will get true, authentic, first-person history as we go into America 250, which we are actually in right now. So we'll be covering the 250th anniversary of the beginning of America every week here on Mrs. Q Live. I hope you are enjoying it. So I hope that that explained to you a little bit more about what was happening as we lead into the war with England, that England has tried to manipulate the colonies to her own benefit, trying to create monopolies, trying to prevent our own expansion and our own commercial growth to prevent us from being competitive with her. Although a very smart man over there recently said that America will be more powerful than England, that an island cannot rule a continent. He said America will have the world with us or without us. A very smart man, William Pitt the Elder, or the Earl of Chatham. And what do you think? Do you think maybe that will happen? Although right now it doesn't look to us as we don't really know what's happening here in New York, except that we have regiments in Canada. The British are still in Boston. Henry Knox is bringing cannon, and we really don't know where this will go, but I think voices here who are predicting that New York will be next on the list to be invaded and attacked are probably right. So we here in New York should be preparing for that to come. So I hope you all enjoyed our evening together tonight. Hope to see you next week. For those of you who were looking for my show last Sunday on Republic Broadcasting Network, I am so sorry. I did living history all weekend, and I sat here at my computer on Sunday after my living history event and typed up all of my show notes, had all of my exhibits, had a great show ready for you. I went downstairs to get something to eat, and when I came up, I had no monitor. My monitor had blown out, and I had no way to read all of those wonderful show notes I'd prepared for you. So I had to run a rerun on Sunday, but that show on the origin of the founding fathers and a number of other things, I'll be doing this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on republicbroadcasting.org. So I hope to see many of you there for that show. That's right, Mr. Robbins says, what good is it to rule our own world, but lose your soul? Exactly. To rule the world, but lose their soul. And that is what happened to England, right? In their attempt to rule the world, they violated everything that was great about England. And in your time, I think you should be cognizant of that to become an empire and to rule the world, you must violate your own morals as a country, your own moral foundation. And England, in doing so, now is at war with her precious colonies, or coming to kill her own children. My dog Rex says, America will be more powerful. Factually, what is meant by America? A taxing authority. In my time, what is meant by America is the union of our colonies, our united colonies here in British America. No longer British America, but we hope simply American America. So that is what we, I think, are looking for, is a united colonies without British rule. What will become of it, I can't say, because it is just December 11th, 1775, but all of you might know where this goes. So thank you again for joining me. It's really a pleasure every Thursday to dress up and greet you and have some fun teaching about what's going on 250 years ago. I hope to see some of you on Sunday at RBN. And then again next Thursday, if you're just a Mrs. Q fan, we'll be back here in my parlor in Hanover Square, New York. And I think I'll go see if Mr. Q is back and what he might have found out at the Burns Coffee House. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of your night.